I'm Sam Kerr. I'm a principal product manager here at GitLab. In this video, I'm going to walk you through the opportunity canvas I've created for filtering streaming audit events. So with that, I'll share my screen and we'll walk through the opportunity canvas template. So the first thing I want to talk about is why I'm doing a light opportunity canvas for this feature rather than doing a full opportunity canvas. And the reason for that is filtering streaming audit events is an iteration on top of an existing capability, the streaming audit events themselves. And so we don't need to go into the level of depth that we would for a full business canvas for a brand new feature where we need to do a lot more validation work. Because we're iterating on top of an existing feature, we can use our lean opportunity canvas and talk through what's in this one as opposed to going through that full canvas. And so let's talk about what the customer pain and the problem that they're experiencing is. And I've tried to boil this down into one sentence, and that is difficult for me to identify an action on the specific audit events I care about because there's so many other events I don't care about which are being sent to me on streaming audit events. This sentence might come from 4 different personas, the most common of those being Cameron, the compliance manager, Sam, the security analyst, Delaney, the development lead, or Sydney, the systems administrator. All 4 of these personas interact with streaming audit events in slightly different ways, but they're all going to feel a similar version of that pain problem statement that I just read to you. So now that we've got the high-level summary of what that pain point is, let's talk about it in a little bit more detail. And really what this boils down to is streaming audit events, there's a ton of data there. It's a very rich data stream where you can understand anything and everything going on inside of a GitLab instance because everything's being recorded as an audit event and sent to you live as it happens. And this is great because it's comprehensive. You know everything. But just like the sentence I read, this causes an overwhelming amount of data to be sent to users. And these 4 different personas are really going to struggle with achieving the goals that they actually have with that data itself. One thing I do want to talk about is the difference between the 4 personas. And I've grouped these into really 2 main categories, being whether those personas want to manually look at the results that are coming through, do the analysis by hand, understand what's happening, or another group wants to see the events as they happen and build automation around when certain events happen to take some sort of automated action. Cameron and Delaney are really going to fall into that first group about, I want to manually look through these logs because I know what I'm looking for, or I'm in an audit environment and I want to prove that this happened, that happened. I only want to look for specific items. We really see that sort of behavioral pattern more commonly with Cameron because Cameron is the person generally doing either the audit itself or prep for an audit, or Delaney is going to be the person that's looking through what their team was working on, what changed within the groups and the projects they're responsible for. In contrast, Sam and Sydney are generally going to fall into that latter category where they're wanting to really build automation and automatic solutions based on when certain things happen. Some of the anecdotes that we've heard from customers representing these personas are, a new user account was just created. I want to know whenever that happens because I'm either going to trigger some sort of workflow process. Maybe I set them up with a new ticket with HR. Maybe I automatically enable some new accounts. Or maybe this is a project that should not have any new users, and I want to alert my security team that, hey, something fishy is going on. You need to look at this right away. Or if sensitive project settings have been disabled that have to be enabled due to a compliance requirement, such as if users are not allowed to self-approve their own merge requests, if that setting ever got flipped, they might want to build automation to automatically reset it to the correct value and then alert security or the compliance team to go talk to whoever actually caused that change to happen. And so those are really the 2 sort of nuances around this problem statement based on persona, whether these individuals want to look at those events and manually process them in a sort of interactive way, or whether they want to automatically take some action, build some sort of automation system around the events that they see. So now we understand the problem space. Let's talk a little bit more about the solution proposal that I want to talk through today. And really what this boils down to is these individuals have very specific types of data they care about, and they don't really care about the rest of the data that's coming in. We want to be able to offer them the ability to filter down what events are streamed to them so that they only get the events they care about and they don't get the ones that they don't. And this is really going to reduce the noise that those users have to parse through. It's going to make the feature a lot easier to get started with. It's going to make it a lot more enjoyable to use, which will encourage more usage. And it's also going to make it easier for those users in the long term. They won't have to store and process as much data, which is going to reduce their compute costs to actually go through and do that computation, that manual filtering they have to do themselves, and any sort of storage that they might want to do today. And so I've proposed a few different iterations of how this might look. So let's walk through those. And the first iteration, we really want to offer a comprehensive list of all the individual audit events that are available inside of GitLab, and simply deliver the ability to turn them on or off to be delivered to a given streaming event destination. We would originally develop this as an API only feature. APIs are a great way to deliver features and functionality because it means that very technically savvy users can build their own capabilities on top of our APIs if they don't like what our user interface looks like for whatever reason. It also is a very easy, it's a more straightforward way for GitLab to iterate if we have a good set of APIs, because then as we want to try new experiments, we learn new things, it's going to be easy to iterate on the user interface, those front end screens, because we have a solid API foundation underneath all of them. Granted, I'm saying this is a first iteration with both an API feature as well as a GUI. Depending on what the level of effort requirements come in as, it's possible this first iteration could actually be split up into two, where we could ship the API version, the API only version first, and then follow on with a second version, which has the screens. This would actually be very similar to how we approached the original streaming audit events capability, which was delivered as an API only feature at first, and just recently got a user interface in a subsequent iteration. I did prepare a small mock-up for what this might look like. And so this is the group audit events screen that we have today. This tab has your streaming audit event destinations. And what this might look like with filtering is you would still have the URL where you tell the events where they need to go. And then you would have some sort of long list, some sort of drop down where you would be able to go in and select, I want project setting changed events to be sent to me. I don't want user profile picture events sent to me. I do want the group name change sent to me, and so on and so forth based on those checklists. And this is really the sort of minimal capability we would want to be able to deliver as part of a first iteration. This would all be checked by default, so everyone would get everything at first and they could uncheck what they didn't want. And that would be really our first way we could go out, interact with users, start getting feedback. And for those personas that do need this capability, we could start getting them more enabled to not have to build all this custom filtering logic they have today. Now, as I'm sure you can imagine, this comprehensive checkbox list is going to be quite long because we have many, many different audit events in GitLab. And so for a second iteration, what we would want to do is offer a logical grouping of these events. We know that there are many events that are closely related to other events. And if you want one, you most likely want the other ones. And so we have some opportunities to do this sort of logical grouping so that users can say, I want this type or this class of events as a whole without requiring them to go through and review every single one of the events. And so we have a mock-up of this as well. And so what that might look like, you have the same screen where your destination URL is going to be there. And then instead of checking every individual checkbox, in this example, you might check project settings, which would automatically opt you into both project name change, project members change, any of the other events that go in that logical group. We would still want to maintain the ability, if you only wanted one or two of the specific events, to be able to not have to check the entire logical group and just get those one or two individual events you want. In this mockup, what that might look like is you have the logical group around group setting audit events, but you can uncheck that if you don't want all of them, and then you can select the individual ones that you do want. And so again, this is a mock-up of what this might look like from a conceptual standpoint. We're going to need to go out and talk to customers, validate this, as well as produce some better looking mock-ups, I'll say, than what I was able to put together on my computer. So now we've talked about the problem as well as our short iteration plan. Let's talk about our business case for this capability. And so the RICE score calculations I came up with are either a 9.6 or a 0.8, depending on whether we divide by years or months. So let's walk through what those scores look like. And so our reach, what count of users are we expecting to reach this feature? I'm marking this down as a 1.5. And my rationale for that is that nearly everyone that uses streaming audit events is going to want to use this feature. I would say it's closer to the 80%, probably higher, rather than the 20% of users will want this. That said, this is also a relatively new feature. We don't have a ton of brand new adoption of streaming audit events yet, as we just recently released it. It's also going to be limited to only Ultimate users. So out of our entire pie of GitLab users, it is going to be relatively smaller. So that's why I gave this one a 1.5. For impact, I gave this capability a 2. And so the reason that I gave this a 2 is that this is going to enable workflows that either weren't easy or weren't possible to before with streaming audit events. When customers have difficulty doing things, it's generally going to be easier to just not do those things and move on to something else. We're all very busy, as our customers are as well. And so they don't have time to necessarily build all the custom logic to filter all of these different events coming in. This is also going to enable them to use any of those cycles that they were going to have to spend to use on building custom filtering themselves, to think about better ways that they might actually consume and get value out of this data by building some of those sort of automation workflows that I talked about previously. This is also going to enable our users to build audit reports more easily. With this sort of filtering, what they can do, they can set up endpoints to monitor, demonstrate the controls were turned on. One of the things that we frequently hear from our customers is, how can I be confident during an audit that a control was turned on and that it stayed on? And the way that we typically work with them in those cases is we say, find the audit event where the control was turned on, set the time range to whatever window you're concerned about during your auditing period, and say, here's where the event was turned on, the control was turned on, and there's no event showing that the control was ever turned off. And that's how you can be confident that the control was enabled for the entire period. And so with audit event filtering in place, it would actually be relatively straightforward to build this as a sort of standardized sort of report to collect standard sorts of events for those common controls we see with a lot of customers. And if we can make that very easy to do, this is going to have a big impact for those users. So confidence on this one, I put as a medium. And so I'm very confident at a high level that this is a problem that these customers have, as well as that they would like the shape of this sort of filtering solution. I've talked to a lot of different customers that have given really good feedback up to this point, which is what shaped this existing proposal. The only reason I'm putting this as medium confidence, though, is once we get this filtering in place, customers are still going to have to figure out what sort of events they want to be able to build that sort of automation. So this won't be a capability where we deliver filtering and all their problems are solved. We'll deliver filtering, but they still need to think about how they want to and how they can consume that in data. And so the only thing that I'm cautious about is, if we give them this filtered data stream, will they actually use it to build the sort of automation that they've talked about in a number of cases? Once we start getting more deployment of streaming audit events as a whole, because it did come out within the last 3 months or so, I think we'll start seeing more and more of our users using the unfiltered version of streaming audit events in the wild. And that's really going to help us to feel either more or less confident on, is filtering going to really be the thing that moves this to the next level? I feel pretty confident that it is right now, but I wanted to put medium just to call out that sort of doubt point. For efforts on this, I think this is going to likely be a 3-person month for an MVC of an API only solution that doesn't include any of the audit event grouping that we looked at in the second mockup. And the real reason that's going to be is we have a lot of different audit events inside of GitLab. My expectation is the difficulty is not going to be adding the filtering logic check. It's going to be going through the entire code base and finding every single audit event that's been created in GitLab and adding whatever that filtering logic looks like to each and every one of them. And so that is the RICE score analysis of this capability. Let's talk about some of the standard business case questions. So what % of our users would we expect to be at various tiers? This would be an ultimate only capability. So all of our users would be ultimate users. What other companies offer a feature like this? Notably, GitHub does have a streaming audit event capability, but they do not have any sort of filtering capabilities. So this would be a net new piece of value our solution would have compared with theirs. SIEMs or security information and event management systems, they generally will be able to offer filtering for different types of information, but that filtering generally is going to need to be done by whoever is using the SIEM. It won't typically come integrated into wherever the data is originally coming from. So when do we intend to deliver this feature? We would plan to deliver this as soon as the MVC is completed, whether that be with an API, basic UI, what have you, and build on top of that. And this kind of ties into my next point for the next question: what would happen if we waited? Really, I mentioned this earlier, if it's hard to figure out how to get the value you need out of a capability, you're less likely to use the capability. Streaming audit events recently released, so we're very much still in that first impression, first look stages of the capability. So the longer that we wait, the more people's first impression will be the unfiltered version of streaming audit events. And that increases the probability of them running into the situation of, this is too much data, I can't find what I need, I'm frustrated, I'm going to go do something else. If we get to that point with a lot of our relevant user base, it's going to be a lot harder to get them to come back and take a second look once we've put out streaming audit event filtering, as opposed to if we could just get their first impression to be, okay, there's a lot of data, but I can filter it to get what I need. I'm happy, I can do my job now. That's really the risk, is that we lose that opportunity for good first impressions and have difficulty getting people to revisit it if their first impression isn't good. For our feature maturity plan, this is going to ideally move us to the complete state. Audit events are currently in viable, and this would be a big point to take us into that complete stage. So our feature development plan, what's the minimal change we could do to make progress? Again, I've mentioned the API only, no grouping sort of approach. This would essentially be a set of API endpoints that let a user manually select, unselect what events are sent to a destination, and have to be done directly through API calls. And so what are the next steps we need to address this problem? It's really going to be starting to do the engineering refinement of what this would look like from a technical perspective. I gave that 3-person months estimates above. We need to get some reality check on that. Is that accurate? Is it too high? Is it too low? What's closer to real? And start that sort of technical exploration. We also want to think about what our long-term direction will look like from a user interface, that UX perspective, and make sure that if we do develop an API only solution at first, that it's something that we can grow on to get to where our vision takes us in the long term for our user interface. What we don't want to have happen is we build an API that works for a couple of cases, but we have to rebuild it again in a breaking change because it didn't support where we wanted to take the user interface in the long term. And at the bottom of this issue, I've linked our epic, which covers a lot more detail about all of this and where the different issues are going to live, or the filtering of the streaming audit events capability. And I thought it would also be helpful to walk you through what our current streaming audit events looks like today, and just to really highlight how much data volume is being generated by all of the different things that are going on inside of GitLab. And so what I'm showing right now, I'm showing my test group that I have on GitLab.com. We're looking at the audit events page, and we're going to look at this pipe dream endpoint that I've configured. And so what this is doing, it's sending every audit event that my GitLab group generates to this endpoint in pipe dream. And let's go over to that screen. You can see there's a lot of events here, right? So this is just from my test group of a single product manager doing small demos to customers. And we've got a ton of data here. And I think this should really make it real. If you were one of those 4 personas, how would you find what you're needing to find here quickly and easily? It'd be very difficult, especially imagine looking at all of these data events once your team has 10, 100, maybe even 1,000 people within the group, all doing actions, all generating these unique events. And with that, I will conclude my review of my opportunity canvas. Thank you for taking the time to watch. If you made it to the end of the video, I'm very much interested in your thoughts, comments, questions, concerns, and would love to have an asynchronous discussion in the issue with you. Thanks so much. Bye.